me turn my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello, and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and today, man, don't hate me, okay? I need you to stick with me on today's show because we're going to do, I don't want to say like a breakdown or analysis, but I've been sitting with this fucking Bad Bunny album, right? Debí tirar más fotos. And literally as the days go on, I find myself falling in love with it more and more, but also just recognizing like the gift that it is because of the messaging. So, Bad Bunny fan or not, I really feel like you're going to get something out of this. So you got to bear with me. Puerto Rican or not, you're going to get something out of this. Bear with me. And especially if you find yourself around the ripe old age of 30 and up, I really, like I talked about this on my Instagram, but I want to expound upon it. I really think like to really value and appreciate this album, you got to be 30 plus. And I said that's like a joke, and like, of course, some like kids got mildly offended by that and like don't understand nuance. But anyway, I really think you've had to have seen some shit, lived some life to really, and again, that happens for all of us at various ages. I'm making it Instagram 90-second video. You got to bear with me. I'm trying to get a message across. But now that we have the ability to expand in long form here on the podcast, when I say that, I mean you have to have had experienced life and the highs and lows that go along with life and the losses that come along with life to really, I think, understand and take in all that he's saying and all that he's reflecting on it with the album, and also to feel it in the way that so many people are feeling it, and for it to also sort of be a wake-up call for so many of our lives, right? Like the central message being the idea of life is short and moments are fleeting, and we have to savor and value those moments, you know, because they're gone. They're here today, gone tomorrow. You know, life goes by incredibly fast. But I kind of wanted to just dive into a couple records on the album. We're not here to play music. This isn't like that kind of show. But I've just been like stewing on it, and I feel like for so many people who listen to this podcast, we're all about transformation. We're all about our culture and growing and learning. And I feel like this album hits on so many of those themes, and there's so much to sort of take away from it, specifically from the vantage point of somebody like a Bad Bunny who has gone from bagging groceries in a small town in Puerto Rico to being the biggest global superstar in the entire world. And that journey and that sort of whirlwind of a journey and all the ups and downs that he went through, and it sounds like a person who sort of feels like they may have lost themselves a bit or refound themselves when they went home to Puerto Rico. And I think home is an idea, right? Home could be a person. Home could be a feeling, a version of yourself, whatever it might be. But this idea, right? That hero's journey. That's literally what Bad Bunny. That's why this shit. Oh my God, I'm like having a fucking as we're talking here. This is the culmination of his hero's journey. I've talked about this a bunch, but Joseph Campbell developed the idea of hero's journey. It's what every like good movie plot follows. Star Wars follows this, the idea that the hero has to leave home and go through all these trials and tribulations only to then return home with all of the knowledge that they have gained, and they bring it back to their people and recognize the value that there is in their home, the place that they you know that has their loved ones, basically. And the reason I think that story and this album is hitting so hard is because it follows that hero's journey of somebody like Bad Bunny, who literally made all of his dreams come true only to realize that while the success, of course, has been a blessing, as I said in my social post, none of it matters if he doesn't have that connection to home, to his loved ones, to his people, to being in community, to being a part of something larger than just himself, right? And being an advocate for the people of Puerto Rico. recognizing like that's the real prize in this life. And that's why this album is so fucking powerful, because it makes you just reflect on so many of those themes that many of us struggle with or try to make sense of throughout the course of our lives. So I kind of wanted to just touch on a few things. I really think like there's so much, I hate the term self-help, but there's so much value here in the world of wellness and self-help, just from like the messaging of somebody being so raw, so honest, so vulnerable on this record. So bear with me. Like I said, you don't have to be a Bad Bunny fan. You don't even have to listen to the album. Just hear me out when it comes to some of this stuff. And we're just going to do this we'll do it for people in the back, okay? Just a deep dive into some of the records and the themes on this album and how I think we could all relate to it. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Say it louder for the people in the Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, so to me, this journey starts with this first song on the album. And it's this one, I will admit, is a bit Puerto Rican. It's a bit New Yorican in terms of the messaging, but I think it's something that resonates for anybody who listens to this podcast, right? The start of this podcast, the basis of this podcast, as I'm sure you're all aware of, is like this idea of otherness, right? And sort of all of us trying to figure out where do we fit in, right? Ni de aquí, ni de allá, right? The idea of not from here, not from there type of thing. Always sort of living in this gray area in terms of our culture, our identity, for some of us, our racial identity, ethnicity, whatever it might be, and trying to find the means to live authentically in a world that is constantly trying to sort of label us and create a caste system, if you will, right? And for the first record, Nueva York, he samples a song called Un Verano en Nueva York from El Gran Combo. And that song is from the perspective, basically, of New Yorkers enjoying a summer in New York City. And what is special about this record, to me personally, what touched me on it was like, here's somebody in Bad Bunny who is extending an olive branch to New York, to New Yorkers, and celebrating New York and celebrating the Latin, specifically in his case, Puerto Rican culture that has been so prominent there, since the 50s. And for me, as a Puerto Rican of the diaspora, it was a beautiful moment of feeling seen. And I feel like so many Puerto Ricans of the diaspora, Latinos of the diaspora, were able to resonate with that. The idea of like, for so long, it's like the people who are from the island, who live there, are considered the real ones, right? And the rest of us are like this other subcategory that it's like, y'all can't sit with us type of thing almost, right? And then you have this dude who is the epitome of authentically Puerto Rican, right? From the island, sings in Spanish, just learned English like yesterday, right? Like he's literally like the Mr. Puerto Rico, right? The most famous man from the island. And him extending that olive branch and tying in New Yorican culture into Puerto Rican culture, if you will. And sort of making us understand that they're both intertwined, right? The beauty of that. And I apologize if we get super Puerto Rican here, but just bear with me. But this is as Puerto Rican as I think we're going to get to a degree. I can't make any promises. But as far as the messaging goes, there's a long history of the New York and Puerto Rico connection. And obviously it's not just New York. There's other cities like Chicago and Orlando these days and a lot, right? But specifically talking about New York with this record, there's a long history of that connection. The first time the Puerto Rican flag was ever flown was in New York City. It was designed and presented in New York City before it was even legally allowed to be used in Puerto Rico. And I mentioned, like, since the 50s, you had this great migration. You had my great-grandparents who came over here in the 50s. You had, even music-wise, I would bust, fuck with my dad, bust his chops all the time, because I would say to him, because he's Mr. like, called me a New Yorican growing up, and my mom But I would make fun of him because it's like, yo, the music you love, like my dad's hero is Hector Lavoe, who, if I'm not mistaken, was born in Puerto Rico but became famous during his time living in New York and working with Nuyorican. But I would bust his chops like, yo, the music you love was created and elevated by Nuyorican. Like salsa, people like Willie Colon and Fania All-Stars, like these are Nuyorican. Frankie Ruiz, right? These are guys who their music is played all over the island, and every generation has grown up, sort of with their parents forcing them to listen to it, since it came out. And it's so deeply ingrained in our culture. And Mark Anthony, his version of Preciosa is so famous on the island, but again, a Nuyorican. And it's ironic how we're made to feel lesser than, but we've contributed so much to the quote-unquote authentic Puerto Rican culture. And I think the beauty of this record, Nueva York, is, in my opinion, my interpretation of it, is Bad Bunny, again, extending that olive branch and creating a bridge between Nuyorican and Puerto Rican and sort of saying, hey, we're all the same here. Like, the thing that aligns us, the thing that truly makes us Puerto Rican is a love for our culture and a love for our community. That's the thing. That's the only thing that matters, not geography. And again, as I've expressed countless times on this podcast, as somebody who has been searching for identity within their culture and where he exists and where he's a part of it, this is another beautiful moment of like confirmation almost. Like, yeah, I belong here. I belong a part of this conversation. I have something I can contribute. And I 100% celebrate my culture. And yeah, I don't know how else to kind of say it. And I wish, and I know that for some people, again, if you're not Puerto Rican, maybe you're not having this moment, but I think all of us can relate to that in some sort of degree, or we can look to different artists who maybe have put on for our motherland or whatever it might be, or even if that hasn't been the case, as far as like mainstream success goes, I think even with this, you can sort of use us as an example of the fact that you do belong, that there is a place for you, that you do have something to contribute to your culture and your community, and that it goes beyond geography as far as where you were born, but more importantly, the love that you have for your culture and your dedication to continuing to not only celebrate tradition and celebrate culture, but to add your own special little stamp to it in some sort of way, right? And I think that's what is so beautiful about this song. And yeah, man, I think it's just fucking beautiful. That's maybe a little bit more personal if you are Puerto Rican, and if you're not Puerto Rican, maybe it won't be hitting as much for you. But I just think, again, I think the basis of this podcast is so many of us trying to find ourselves in our culture and our community. And I think it's a beautiful thing to sort of have, maybe the group that at times made us feel lesser than. It's beautiful to kind of have them co-sign the fact that no, you belong. And more like visually, I look at it as almost like they're pulling you up a seat at the table, right? And you've been like watching them from afar, and like how nice was that in school? Like if you ever found yourself like alone in a class and you didn't have any friends there, or like you got scheduled at lunch and your friends weren't in the same lunch period as you, and somebody was kind enough to like extend you a chair to sit at their table, like how much of a relief that felt like. I feel like that's what this is in song version. So that's beautiful. Now, from the next one that I want to touch on, I'm not going to touch on the entire album. I think there's just certain points that like were super eye-opening and reflective for me. But the next one for me, the song Baile Inolvidable. This is a salsa record. And y'all, let me tell you, I don't know what came over me. I'm in the car driving. I'm on the highway. The record starts out kind of like a typical, I don't want to say typical, but like a Bad Bunny record. It's a little out there with some of the sounds. Like it doesn't even sound like it's a Latin record per se. And then all of a sudden he introduces this like horn section. Like no vocals, or not really any big vocal over it. Like just a horn section. No drums or anything. And I don't know what the fuck came over me. I just start crying, literally from a sound of a horn. And then the shit just drops into like a beautiful classic salsa record. And I played it for my parents, and they were moved by it. Like, they were just like, "Oh my god, that's beautiful," right? And that's the first time, like, they love Bad Bunny for what he does for Puerto Rico, but like I saw on so many people's TikToks, like, they were like, "Oh, this is the first time I can actually listen to a Bad Bunny record with my parents," right? And they can appreciate it. And there was like this connection. I had that beautiful moment, like we were eating lunch and I was just playing them the music. And actually I'm reflecting like, wow, that's a moment in time right there that I didn't even realize, like, how special that was. Sharing that with my parents. My parents are both like really into music, not as musicians, but just as fans. Like, I can remember being in the backseat of my mom's car on the way to school, and she'd be blasting like Olga Tañón and La India and Mark Anthony, like, to get herself pumped up for the day, and she'd be singing and dancing. And my dad, had like the big stereo at the house and a ton of different CDs, and like he would make mixes for like parties that they were going to and things like that, and and he was a big salsa fan, and so I grew up with them playing me the music they loved. And of course, as a kid, you don't recognize the beauty of it. You're like, oh, that's just old music, right? Especially my dad used to listen to music like of his grandparents. My dad's an old soul. But even the salsa stuff, the Mark Anthony, was like, there were certain songs I fucked with, but like for the most part, I wasn't going to go home and like play the CD for myself, right? I wanted to hear something else. And you don't really recognize how special these records are until you get a bit older and you can sort of hear them differently. And I think that is what Bad Bunny sort of arrived to with this album, where it's not just reggaeton or Latin trap, but he's hitting on some really old genres of music from like bomba, la plena, and salsa. And he's tapping into nostalgia, right? A lot of the stuff that many of us grew up listening to that was our parents' music, he's now reintroducing it in a fresh way that makes us appreciate it, right? And I think this is the beautiful thing about music, right? When it comes to culture, when it comes to your people, like, music has always been a way from, the earliest days of man as a means of communication, right? A lot of these sounds, like bomba and plena, like these are sounds that came from Africa, right? So you're talking about during the slave trade, when they were dropped off in places like Puerto Rico, they were playing this music, right? And it was almost like this form of rebellion. It was like this way of them protesting the erasure of their culture. And it was like a spiritual protest almost, right? And those sounds, right? Like when I reflect on it, like the sound of that horn being introduced, I think it made me so emotional because it brought me back to being a kid and being surrounded by that music constantly. And again, now that I'm older, I realize how beautiful it is. Like, when I see it, on the island, I've seen live bands playing it, or I see people dancing to it. I don't dismiss it anymore as like old music, old people stuff. I like can stop and appreciate it for what it is. Like the fact that there's like this unspoken language that happens when a salsa band starts playing, and you know how to dance salsa, and like all these little things. And particularly now in today's current day and age, and especially for many of us that are a couple generations removed, maybe even, it's easy to start losing parts of our culture. And honestly, that's sort of the American way to a degree, right? Is you begin to just adapt to the way things are, and as you move out of areas that are heavily populated by your own people, right? You're then less and less exposed to the things that remind you of your culture, and over time, it's easy to sort of prioritize that culture less and less, and to be a part of it and participate less and less. And I think that's what happens. Like, when you get to the suburbs, when I was in the Bronx as a kid and we'd be at my grandmother's, it's like I was surrounded by Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, and you're hearing the music, and you're seeing in the summers, the people selling the Puerto Rican stuff around the time of the parade, and the bodega person only speaks Spanish, and all these things, right? You're just surrounded by hearing all, your people's native tongue and the sounds of it, the language, all these things. But again, being in the suburbs, it was easy to start losing that, and for it to become foreign to me, and for me not to appreciate it. And I think as you begin to assimilate, you sort of let go of anything that makes you feel other or makes you look othered. And the beautiful thing about like him tapping into these old genres, it is sort of you reminiscing on the place that they had in your life as a kid, reflecting their importance, and now sort of reawakening you to the fact that it's your job to continue these traditions for another generation, right? And that's, again, I think what was so incredible for a lot of people listening to this album, it sort of awoken this pride inside of them and made them realize either how much of it they were missing in their life or how important it is in their life. And when you recognize and you are able to be present to that importance, you then recognize you have to savor it. You have to encapsulate it, if you will, right? You have to nurture it, and you have to uphold it for the next generation, And an album like this, I think for me, when I talk about getting emotional when I'm listening to lyrics, it's recognizing how special that connection is. Like, and I went to one of my DJ friends was doing he DJs like Thursdays, like this Latin night. The album came out on a Sunday, so like, nobody had a chance to listen to it in a club really for the most part, and that was gonna be the first chance. And he threw a Bad Bunny night, and like he did a brilliant job with it. Shout out to DJ Aldez. But he went and got flags, and like it was like there was like this surreal moment that happened where I look into the crowd, and it's just a sea of people waving the Puerto Rican flag, and I'm like, man, and my age and younger, and they're playing like the salsa records and shit, and it's like, whoa, like and I felt so at home. I felt so overcome, and we're just like, this is not like, it's not like a fucking, I don't know, a packed crowd at Madison Square Garden. It's a club, a small club in Jersey City, New Jersey, right? We're not even on the island. And I just felt overwhelmed with cultural pride and just warmth and fulfillment, and like at home. And that moment was given to us by this person who sort of made it a point to document our culture and reignite it and reinvigorate it for the next generation to pass it down, right? To make sure that our beautiful culture doesn't get lost and doesn't get watered down beyond recognition. And that's what's so beautiful, because you feel that shit in your soul, right? I had I think it's Dr. Marielle Bouquet, where she does a study on like how trauma is passed down from ancestry. But I also believe like the good shit is passed down from ancestry as well, right? That's what comes over me when I hear that music, or when any of us are feeling some sort of connection or attachment, or something is speaking to us via our culture. I think it's something from the ancestors that is ingrained in our DNA that makes us have some sort of emotional attachment and emotional reaction to it that is so incredibly beautiful. And again, interchange salsa, put regional Mexican music, whatever it is, right? Like whatever that is for you. But I think that it's a reminder of the importance of upholding the traditions and the culture for the next generation, and making sure that it doesn't get watered down as much as we possibly can, and remains authentic. Because it's up to us as adults, man. We're the next generation who's responsible for upholding tradition. And if we don't, it gets lost, and eventually it's unrecognizable or non-existent. Like, we're the documentarians whose job it is of this generation to keep the fucking, keep the culture alive. And that's through, the shit. I'm about to go take salsa lessons. That's like through that, right? Learning how to dance salsa. And that's me keeping the culture alive, that I can pass that down to the next generation, and appreciating this music. Like Bad Bunny with this music is encapsulating and reuniting the culture and keeping it alive in that way. And how we speak about it and how we get excited about it in those events like I talked about. Like all of that contributes to us keeping our beautiful culture alive and making sure that it's preserved. I've been looking for that word, preserved, for the next generation. And that's why that is so special. Yeah. I don't know, man. I think it's just a beautiful thing. And I want to touch on 2 more things here. Maybe 3, yeah. But we'll take a quick break here, and then we'll be right back. And we're going to get these. All right, we are back. I want to touch on the title track for the album, Debí tirar más fotos. This is the one, if you've seen it on social media, like the trend is to post pictures of like you and your grandparents or your parents, or pictures of them when they were younger, whatever it might be, like a collage. And it's this idea of, like, the whole idea of debí tirar más fotos is like, I wish I took more pictures, right? It's the idea of nostalgia, of savoring the moment, of celebrating those who are no longer with us or who are getting older. It's really this idea of like presence to the idea of how short life really is. And this one's emotional, for a lot of people. And that's why I made kind of like the joke about this album being for those who are, 30 plus. Because once you hit that age, I know other people have gone through traumatic things at all ages, but I think it's safe to say for most of us, once you're 30 and over, you are at that point in your life where you begin to lose loved ones in various ways, grandparents, for some parents, aunts, uncles, friends, whatever it might be. You've begun to suffer some sort of loss. And it's particularly emotional because a lot of times the unfortunate part about it is we take moments for granted, and myself included. We are so focused on the future and where we're going, and many of us who are goal oriented and all these things, that we sacrifice moments that we think are little, but in reality are the big moments, right? Holidays, birthdays, all these things we sort of expect tomorrow, even though it's not promised. And it isn't until we get an abrupt wake-up call, oftentimes, be it in the form of some sort of loss or scare or tragedy, that we sort of recognize the preciousness of life and how fleeting it really is, and how special these moments that we get to spend together are, especially with those that we love. And I think for a lot of people, this song is a reminder of that. A reminder of moments not to be taken for granted. And a song like this, I think for a lot of people, they reflect on those that they've lost, loved ones that they had. And you can't help but become emotional in that reflection, right? And I'll share a personal story. This one hits hard for me. I lost my grandfather this past August, and it hits hard for me in the opposite way that I think about the song. I do wish I took more pictures. But what I will say is, in the last 2 years, I spent more time with my grandfather than I had in maybe the previous 10. Right? He lived in Puerto Rico. Prior to the end of 2019, I hadn't gone to the island for years. And I got to spend Thanksgiving with him in 2019. We did a family trip out there. And then I saw him again at the beginning of 2021. And then from there, I was in Puerto Rico every few months. And every time I went, I made sure I took the drive out there to go see him and spend the afternoon with him. And we really got blessed with a gift. My grandfather, he begun to have problems with like his lungs. I think it's emphysema is technically what it is. And we had a scare in in 2021. So it's 2022. I went when I started going seeing him a lot. We had a scare in 2021, summer 2021, and it seemed like we were gonna lose him. And then all of a sudden, after he made a full recovery in the hospital, and somehow we were blessed with like another 2.5 years with him. And one thing that I'm forever going to be grateful, and I still get emotional, I still get sad when I think about it, but I'm proud of myself. Well, first of all, I'm grateful for the gift that was that scare that woke us up to the fact that you need to make the most of this time. And I'm grateful for the gift that was that 2.5 years of time that we had. Because as much as it hurts that he's not here, and you know, as I go back, I go visit his wife, and I'll spend time with her, and his chair is still there by the door, you know, where he'd be waiting for me whenever I would go, and it hurts, right, to just look at that empty chair. But I'm so grateful that I like woke up and realized like, yo, you have to prioritize this. You don't know how much time you have left with this man, right? And take advantage of it. And like, I can honestly say like, man, I did that. To the best of my ability. You know, every time I was out there, I made it a point to go see him. It didn't matter if I was only in Puerto Rico for 3 days and you know, I didn't want to take the 45-minute drive without traffic over there. I did it. I forced myself to. And I'm so happy that I did and so grateful. And I just want to try to make it a point as much as I can, the best that I can, to do that for all of the special people in my life, so that I don't ever have to live with that regret that I didn't make it a point to spend enough time with them, you know. And I think that's like the messaging of that song, the feeling that it brings up is like that nostalgia, because there are other people in my life where they're sadly gone, and I feel like I could have done more to maintain that relationship and make them even more of a part of my life. And I'm, you know, sad about that. But you know, I think overall, man, the thing that I think resonates with me, or like something I'd heard somewhere, and I may have mentioned this before on the podcast, but they talk about when you begin to really break things down into numbers, right? Like your parents are getting older if you're lucky enough that they're still here. And you're like, okay, maybe I have 20 Christmases left with them, 20 more birthdays to celebrate with them, 10 more depending on their age, right? I mean, who knows, whatever realistic number it is. But when you break it down in that way, you realize, oh shit, those numbers go by quickly. Those numbers aren't even a lot. I've actually spent more time with them than I have left to spend. And that's like a gut punch, but sometimes that's what you need to force you to prioritize what's really fucking important in this life. And also make you try to be as present as possible in those moments. And man, it's tough, dude. Even with all like the work I do, I still find myself taking those moments for granted and regretting it. But this life goes by quick, man. And again, back to like why you have to be 30 plus to really appreciate it. Anybody over 30 can reflect on the idea of like, bro, it felt like yesterday that I was 21. 22, 23. Parts of me still feel like I'm in my 20s. It went by fast. I just got like an email about like an anniversary with iHeart. I think I'm on like 9 years working. I literally remember my first day like it was yesterday. I remember there was an artist named Sean Hook performing in the coffee lounge that we had. I remember sitting at their shitty computer filling out paperwork. I remember being walked down to HR, like getting my picture taken for the ID badges, you know, for my $15 an hour overnight part-time job. It feels like fucking yesterday, man. And life goes by so quickly. And if you don't appreciate it and make it a point to be as present as humanly possible, you're going to find yourself living with a lot of regrets about how you spent your time. And you're not getting that back. And that's what this song really touches on. Like the importance of these things. And even with him, right? Again, he even building off of this, he just announced he's doing a residency in Puerto Rico. I think it's from like the end of June till August or something like that. All his shows are going to be in Puerto Rico. And it's the idea like he doesn't want to be anywhere else but Puerto Rico. And again, like this man has traveled the entire world, has made all of his dreams come true, has been the celebrity, has dated the celebrities. And he's at a point in his life where he's saying like, this is what's most important to me. I've done it all, and I recognize this is what brings me the most joy and what is the most valuable to me. It's my island, my home, the people I call home, the place that I call home, the culture I call home. I need to just be present in that. And, you know, I relate to that. Obviously I'm never been Bad Bunny. I've never done it in that way, but I also, I think, made a bit of a radical change as far as like how I used to live my life and how I prioritize certain things. And like, again, I've mentioned this a bunch, but like, you know, I see my parents every week. I talk to my mom every day. That wasn't the case, you know, when I was really on my grind and I was living right outside the city and all this. Like I maybe saw my parents once a month at that point, you know. But I've seen enough, experienced enough, and matured enough to recognize how important it is to have that relationship and to see them and to maintain that and to sit down and eat dinner and share meals together and talk and all those things, you know, how important it is to them, but also to me, and how grateful I'm going to be, hopefully, you know, years and years and years and years and years and years from now when they're no longer with me. I'm going to be so grateful about the fact that I prioritize having this much time with them and that I moved closer to them. And that even though it sucked commuting back into the city when I had to, the fact that I'm 15, 20 minutes away from my parents has been such a blessing. But yeah, it's about treasuring that time you have, man. I was gonna touch on a couple things. He has a record called Lo que pasó a Hawaii. I won't go super deep into that. I feel like we've talked about it a bunch, but like he references not wanting what happened to Hawaii to happen in Puerto Rico. And in Hawaii, you know, you have a place that has become so expensive that native Hawaiians can't afford to live there, and their culture has been erased essentially, and it's just a tourist haven. And speaking about how Puerto Rico is slowly becoming that and could become that if it continues on the same path. But, you know, like I said, we've talked about that a bunch. The last one I want to talk about is called boquete. Now, boquete is a slang word in Puerto Rico for pothole. And if you're not familiar, Puerto Rico has, unfortunately, a pothole issue. There's a lack of attention to the infrastructure on the island. And potholes are a everyday problem that people on the island have to deal with. Like big potholes, like fuck up your car potholes. And in this song, Bad Bunny does a brilliant job of sort of being tongue-in-cheek and using the pothole as an analogy for a toxic relationship, but also while still commentating on the current status of like how bad that is in Puerto Rico, that's a part of everyday life. But the sort of messaging is just like a lack of attention and care leads to something like a pothole on the roads that can destroy and fuck up your entire day, your car, and I know somebody, a friend of a friend out there, where she was telling me a story of how she hit a pothole. She's a bartender. She hit a pothole driving home one night, and it completely fucked up like the whole underbelly of her car, to the point that the car was totaled. And how that now has created a hindrance for her because she can't afford to buy another one. And now she basically has to live close to the metro area, but the rent is so expensive, and it's kind of like a give and take, because it's like she's paying expensive rent because she has no choice, because she can't afford to buy a car, and she can't save for a car because she's paying expensive rent, right? Like she would rather be able to move a little further outside the metro area, but then she would need a car to get to work every day because she doesn't have one. It's this whole like catch-22. And all of that caused by a fucking pothole, essentially, right? And a lack of attention, a lack of care by the local government and their infrastructure. And he compares that to a toxic relationship. One where you have somebody who is really not treating you the way that you deserve to be treated, and continues to add unnecessary stress to your everyday life because of the lack of care and attention that you're receiving. And I think for anybody who has been in a toxic relationship before, where your partner was toxic, it's kind of fucking crazy how, as human beings, we can normalize just about anything, and we can build up a tolerance and learn to live with just about anything. And I've been in that position before. I was in a really toxic relationship. And when you reflect on it and, through therapy and things, and I actually even continue to attract those types of people, or be attracted to, I should say. And a lot of it you realize is like this lack of care and attention to yourself as well, of recognizing where you're vulnerable, of not giving yourself the love that you need, but instead looking for it externally. And when you do that, you leave yourself open to people who know how to say and do the right things to make you feel wanted, but are just not people who are good, or are not in a good place in their life and are really depleting your energy every single day, every moment that they're in your life. Right? And you realize, how much of yourself you lost in the process of like just trying to get by in this relationship, right? And not loving yourself enough to recognize that you deserve better and to take the hard step to get out of that, or to have the fear that you might not meet somebody else, or to have the fear that there's something wrong with you, right? But and that goes beyond like romantic relationships. There's job situations that are just incredibly fucking toxic and are taking from us every fucking day and making us a shell of ourselves. I've been in that situation as well, where you're like a zombie just walking in there and you're just like mentally checking out and just doing what you have to do to get in and get out. And it's almost like there are times where you would fucking zone out for the entirety of your shift and you would leave and just be like, what the fuck just happened today? Like, and that's no way to live, right? You're really dumbing yourself down. You're dumbing down your quality of life. And again, it's like that lack of care and attention to yourself and your needs is inviting pure fucking chaos into all the other aspects of your life and is depleting you, right? And is wearing you down and is beating you down every day. And that's why it's so important to have boundaries in this life and to, be unafraid to remove yourself from situations, right? It's almost like, that saying, like the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. Many of us stick to jobs because it's safe, because it's a consistent paycheck, even though it's fucking horrendous. Like we feel terrible whenever we're there. And that's just an incredibly unhealthy and a miserable way to live. And it speaks to the idea that, the life we want is outside of our comfort zone, right? If you're miserable in a situation, you have to be bold enough to take the risk to fix the situation, to, create the life that you want. And the path may not and probably will not be easy, but you still have to push yourself to demand better of yourself, to know what you truly deserve, and to be unafraid to give it to yourself, right? To give yourself the care and attention needed to get out of a toxic situation, whatever it might be. Friendship, relationship, work job, whatever it is, right? Addiction, whatever it might be. It's giving yourself the care and attention to handle the infrastructure that is you, right? And putting in the hard work that it takes to repair whatever's holding you back from making the change that you need in this life. And that's incredibly powerful to me as well, the messaging behind that. And honestly, I could go on for days with this stuff, but I know we've dabbled in a lot here. So we'll take a quick break here, and then we'll kind of like just, I think, summarize a bit of everything and my final thoughts here after the break.
Time for conclusion soon.
All right, so I feel like I touched on a couple random different themes from like the theme. Again, listen, you gotta listen to this album, not for nothing. But anyway, what am I trying to get at here? I think, what's a big takeaway for me outside of the direct messaging of it all? It's the importance of doing the thing that you love doing. Because it really does matter. And we're not all going to be lucky enough to touch as many lives as somebody like a Bad Bunny. But there's value in the thing we love and the way that it can touch other people. And the thing that is burning inside of you that speaks to you, that you love so much, it's your gift to share with the world. And yeah, Bad Bunny's doing it on a larger scale, but again, the reaction you saw, it was like this man was able to use his gift to touch people in a way that only really he can. And it just sort of shows you the inherent value in the things that we love doing that come naturally to us, how important they are not only for ourselves, but potentially for the lives that they could touch. You know, I always subscribe to this idea. You never know who's listening. You never know who's watching. And especially in today's day and age, man, it's not about reaching millions of people. It's just about contributing in our own little way, whatever it might be. Whether you like podcasting, you fucking coaching, doing art, whatever it is, like, the world is thirsting for our perspective, right? There's somebody out there who's longing to be seen. And our art or our talent, our gift, our effort might be the very thing they need to find themselves, to relate to someone else, to push them to just keep on going. And that's why, if there's one thing I want you to really take away from this all is, share your gifts. Don't allow the fear of public opinion to keep you from sharing your magic with the world. The world needs it. Somebody in this world needs it. Even if it's just personal social interactions with people, don't make yourself smaller. Like, somebody out there needs to hear you or needs to catch your energy, needs to befriend you, whatever it is. I think more than anything, this album is a reflection of what happens when somebody truly finds themselves and decides to live authentically. Magic happens. I would argue this is probably going to be his biggest album. By far, this one has had the biggest, I think, impact, and it's only out for a week. And the irony is, this is his most raw and authentic album he's ever done. Because he didn't just give us club bangers. He didn't just give us reggaeton or Latin trap with, wordplay. He gave us heartfelt music that meant something, that had real messaging that people could relate to and get behind. And the world is like obsessed with it because we're all starving for authenticity. In a world of social media where everything is fucking fake, everything is manufactured, and people are trying to find the next big thing and catch the algorithm and keep up with trends, we're starving for real and authentic art and communication and just fucking people. And that's why it's important for all of us to do the work, to find ourselves and be unafraid to share ourselves in a healthy way. Boundaries are important, but be unafraid to share ourselves with the world. The world is starving for us in some way, shape, or form, somebody out there. And I think that's the bigger overarching takeaway from this album is, as I've always said, authenticity is your superpower. This dude tapped into the greatest art of his entire life, a career-defining album, all because he chose to show up 100% as his authentic self. He didn't follow trends, right? Nobody said bomba en plena or the next thing. No. But he decided to tap into that. Even salsa. But when he was making this album, our generation wasn't talking about salsa. Then, of course, people like Alejandro tapped into it, and then Guayna just put out something. But when he's conceptualizing these songs, that wasn't even a conversation. But he tapped into authenticity, what he was really feeling. And the world has resonated now as a result. And that's what makes this project so special. That's what makes him so special. And it's what makes all of us so special, is the moments we're able to tap into our authentic self and just give ourselves to the world, to those in our life, unabridged, to, in some way, shape, or form, feel a bit human as a result of seeing us just living as a human. I don't know how else to explain that. In a world that is getting increasingly less and less human, we're all starving for just raw,
human interaction to know that we're not the only ones going through what we're going through, or experiencing what we're experiencing, or starving for what we're starving for. And raw and honest communication and art and talent are the things that keep us all connected and inspire us to keep on fighting another day. And I think that's what this project did for so many people, myself included. All right, I'm exhausted. I forgot. I went in on this little digestion of the album. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, keep sharing your shit, man. Fuck the opinions. I know it's hard. I get a lot of backlash and hate on social media. In the comments at times, people are fucking mean and terrible. But for all those terrible comments, there's like 10 good ones. Or there's somebody out there watching it that you see them, you run into them, you talk to them, and they're just like, man, thank you for what you're doing. I'm inspired by it. And even if you don't hear that, trust me, somebody is lurking, because I'm more of a lurker than a commenter, and saying like, damn, I'm really proud of that person, and like I'm inspired by what they're doing. And it's given me a little bit more freedom or strength to be more authentically me. And that's all that matters. We're all leaving our stamp. And again, we're continuing on to celebrate our culture as well, by living more authentically as well. I don't know. I'm going to stop there because I'm just fucking running around in circles now. But thank y'all so much for tuning in. I'll catch you on Thursday for a brand new episode for Thursday Trends. Till then, stay safe and we will talk soon. Peace.